We'll be bringing updates on that in South Africa. So let's move away from South Africa to Kenya. Yesterday was the third time we witnessed protests in Kenya. Of course, the Azimio leader citing high cost of living and a decision to allow the access to IEBC service. The African Union has encouraged the two political figures, that is President William Samuel Ruto and opposition leader Raila Odinga, to engage in dialogue. So let's talk about what the update is in this regard. And we have our East African journalist here with us, Darren Bartlett, to give us some updates. Good morning, Darren. It's always great to have you.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Very well, Darren. Hope you're well as well. Let's head into what's happening in Kenya. It's an unfortunate incident, Darren. We've seen loss of lives, loss of property. After the first riot, the first protest, the vice president, deputy president had come out to talk about they had lost about $15 million worth of goods. So much loss has happened, but we don't know if this sit down is going to happen. So we want you to sort of give us a breakdown. What's the next step?
Well, it's so sad that where it started on Monday, we thought that maybe the conversation will be had between the opposition and the ruling government to find a way of not seeing the country degrade itself in a situation that we see today. But unfortunately, it went into Thursday, where we saw the former president's farm, Kenyatta, being looted, animals and quite a lot of property was taken. To yesterday, when we saw supermarkets being looted, journalists beaten, and quite a number of people injured because of the insistence of the opposition leader to say that they want the high cost of living to go down, one, but also he wants to see that the electoral reforms are put in place, case in point, to see that the replacement or the selection of more commissioners on the IEBC, which is the electoral body, be stopped after the previous ones resigned, the ones who had actually rejected the results that came out from last year's elections. And this has put in a country in a position where I feel that it's going to get into sometime, and this is a conversation that people don't want to have. It may go tribal. It's a place that you don't want to go because Kenya stands on tribal pillars. Even when they try to deny it a number of times, this is about Kikuyus, Luos, Kalenjins, who are in control of most government offices, plus other small tribes that are in control. And it is so sad to see that none of them seems to appreciate dialogue in this case. And that's why the religious leaders, the U.S. envoy, tried to have a conversation with the DP, the Deputy President of Kenya, and trying to encourage them to have dialogue. However, both camps are not willing to have this dialogue only if, and they say that the dialogue can only happen if conditions are met. On the side of Raila Odinga, he says, open up the servers of the IEBC, which is the electoral body, to audit the presidential elections, but also too that the cost of living should go down. Then he will have a dialogue. On the side of the president, they say, one, that he should stop the protests, Raila Odinga should stop the protests, but also two, he should accept the results that came from the election. So clearly, these two things, you can put aside the cost of living because that is not unique to Kenya. We've seen it in Uganda as well. The cost of living went up. In Rwanda, inflation went up. I think it has the highest inflation rate in East Africa. Tanzania is not also doing well as same. So the argument of cost of living can be put aside because, to be honest or fair, this conversation is about political power. Raila Odinga lost an election and also lost an appeal, in the Court of Appeal when it came to, the Constitutional Court, when it came to appealing the results of the election. So it's not something that sits well with him, and that's why they're taking that direction. Do we expect things to calm down? Probably yes, because Ruto is such a diplomat. Whereas his camp, as the camp, they don't think that they should have this conversation, but Ruto may actually go ahead and have this conversation. And some political analysts that I had conversations with yesterday believe that Raila Odinga probably could be seeking a job in government, just the same way he had a handshake when he became the first Prime Minister of Kenya. Is it a conversation that may be introduced again? We are not so sure about that. But if you go back to conversations such as the BBI, that was the Building Bridges Initiative, that President Uhuru and Raila Odinga shook hands over, and they wanted to introduce that document, it was looking at positions such as Prime Minister. Maybe Kenya may be forced to reintroduce that conversation and see that the only way to bring calm to Kenya is having Raila Odinga have a position in office. Whether he will accept it is another thing, but I think he stands his ground. He only wants an audit in the elections, and also the cost of living. I believe he will. Okay, maybe over time, if the two have been talked to, because I now see they've attracted the AU. The US has come into this conversation. The East African leaders have come into this conversation. Diplomatically, it may come to having a sit-down conversation. But whether Raila will have a position in office, I'm not so sure. It could happen again the same way it happened in 2007, when that chaos broke up, and the only way to resolve it was to have Raila Odinga have the position of the Prime Minister, which they previously didn't even have. So yeah, it's getting worse.
All right.
The way I look at it. However, police has managed actually to contain. They've managed to keep the chaos out of the center in Nairobi. It's just on the sides of Nairobi, but it keeps growing. It keeps growing.
All right. Well, it's also quite unfortunate that one man is able to bring to the knees an economy that already was starting to look very beautiful and bright, although with its own challenges. But then again, like you said, let's get to see if what Ruto will do, and most importantly, would Raila back down. But let's take this next story very, very quickly. Well, let's talk about the peace deal between the government and the opposition in South Sudan. We do know that it is in jeopardy after President Salva Kiir sacked two key ministers, including the wife of his rival and first vice president. We're talking of Riek Machar. Now, how will this affect the fragile relationship between the two sides, and what are the implications for the country's stability?
Well, definitely there's going to be it's going to destabilize because the peace deal that happened in 2018 has already been implemented at a very slow pace. And one of the things in the peace deal was to have, or the points in the peace deal was to have an election in 2024. And another pillar in that peace deal, for purposes of security on the side of the opposition, they wanted the state minister and also the minister for defense to come from the opposition, which was granted. And that peace deal happened, and we saw calm coming to South Sudan, though not fully. But now the sacking of the minister of defense, who comes from the opposition party, is being replaced by a member from the ruling party, is already causing insecurity in the army of South Sudan. Remember, this army was divided at first. The first vice president, who is Riek Machar, had his own army and also the ruling government had its own army. So when they came together, they were controlled by the opposition. But now, if you have a member or a minister of defense coming from the ruling party, there's already instability in the army, because they believe that now, since the peace deal has been broken in this way, they kind of have, they feel like they're now walking on eggshells, that anything they can come into another civil war, going back to where we were over 10 years ago. That is at risk. And already I can see the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, President Yoweri Museveni, and other African leaders, especially the President of Cameroon, who is also the chairman of the AU, have started engaging Salva Kiir on this, because now it looks like we may not have an election in 2024, since they have already started disagreeing on the journey and implementing the peace deal. It's a slippery place. South Sudan is very slippery. We've been here 11 years ago. We came to 2018. We thought this is now the journey to having a democratic state where people have to elect their own president, where the army is united, where all the states are now believing in the system that is there. It's now broken. That is a risk that the country may slip back to a civil war after these changes that have happened in the army.
Wow. Well, nice way to break that down, Darren. Thank you so much. Well, do peace deals really work in this part of West Africa? We did see politicians and their party members signed a peace accord. But on the day of elections, we did see what actually took place after it was signed. And there are many other conversations, just as you have broken it down from Silver Care and also looking at the
proposed handshake.
Exactly.
These handshakes.
Exactly.
Politicians are greedy people. They say one thing, they'll do another.
At the end of the day, their interest is what matters the most.
Well,
That's what a lot of people would.
It's always at the fore. It's just clearly in front of you. And you have been clearly in front of us, Darren. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to have you again on Friday. Thanks for taking time out to break these stories for us.
See you next month.
Welcome. Oh, it's my birthday.
Oh, is it really your birthday or your... Because it's...
Today?
Yeah, today.
Oh,
Wow,
your birthday makes it
Day.
Osalge as well.
Osalge.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Happy birthday, Darren. Thank you so much for bringing us updates with some of the biggest stories on the Eastern African part of the continent. Thank you.
Welcome.